very interesting presentation. We'll have another presentation also in March, and I'm sorry, in May, and Ken will tell you about that. To any of you who are new to these presentations, they're put on through the donations of members of our society. So if any of you would like to join, we have applications back there, and your membership helps us bring these kind of presentations to the group. And a side note, every year we have a cleanup of our historical area, museum and pergola, and that is going to take place May 16th, which is the Saturday after Mother's Day at 10 o'clock. It's a Saturday. And this year in the museum, we've switched things up a little bit. We've kind of been war-related the last couple of years, and this year we have a wedding gown display. Wedding gowns from the 1929, every decade up to 1980. So some interesting dresses to see. Also some carnival glass and some miniatures. So we're kind of open up to you ladies to have a visit if you haven't been in for a while. But before we start, I'll make sure your devices, are on vibrate or off. Thank you very much. This is Ken. He's going to tell you about the
Okay, good evening, and thank you for coming out. I greatly appreciate it. I'll say we had a good turnout tonight. Everyone cooperated. So first Monday of daylight savings time, so we're a little longer late. I just thought I'd let you know about couple upcoming programs. Our next program will be in May the 2nd, Monday, same time at 7 o'clock. We are going to have Debbie Rimmer, and she's going to be talking about the lost cities and villages of Macomb County. We had Deb out to the Roseville Historical Society several months ago. It is a very detailed, very interesting program. Deb went out, photographed a lot of the little cities that have since disappeared, and she spans about a 30-year period showing some of the intersections, what the cities look like, and today they're plowed under. They're either condominiums or strip malls and so forth, and I keep pushing her to do a book on this particular topic, but she will be here today talking about the lost villages of Macomb County. In November, right around Armistice Day, the second Monday in November as well, we are going to have Beverly Bishop talking about the Second War in Macomb County in 1943, how life was here in Macomb County during the war on the home front, how did people react, and how did people survive away from the war, but there was a lot of support, a lot of industry, a lot of home fronts, a lot of rationing was going on here. And we're very fortunate to have Bev Bishop here with us this evening. And we also want to thank Beverly for hosting the Faygo Taste Test Contest. I hope we had a few successful winners, but please enjoy the Faygo beverages with us in the rear. Joe Grimm is well known in Detroit, works for the Free Press. He also wrote the book here after building up a tremendous thirst on his previous book, which he also has available, Coney Detroit. Both were published by Wayne State University Press. Joe is a lifelong Detroit resident and is a journalism professor at Michigan State University. With his students or by himself, he has published more than 20 books. One MSU student gave Joe the contact for a high school English teacher, Susie Ferguson, and granddaughter of Ben, one of Faygo's founding brothers. She was key to writing and illustrating the book. By the way, Joe's favorite Faygo classic is Rock and Ride, and his favorite New Age flavor is Arctic Sun, which we just happened to have. So, anyway, without further ado, I want to introduce you to Joe Grimm. Sit back. I think you will enjoy the program. It's a nice nostalgic look at one of Detroit's lasting companies. Unfortunately for us, we talk so much about the companies that have come and gone, the Saunders, the Hudsons, so on and so forth. Hard band. Fortunately for us, Faygo is still with us, and very much hopefully will be with us for many years to come. So, Joe.
Thank you, Ken and Mike. And thank you for coming. Wow. There's a lot of you. And you have some strange questions. I've been talking to people, they've been asking me lots of strange stuff. I don't know if I'm up to the task, but I'll try. So, well, let me just ask, are you guys ready to rock and ride? Yeah. Okay, that's what we're here for. We have a couple of ground rules. The first ground rule, I'm invoking this in 2020. The first ground rule is, during this talk, we're in a politics-free zone.
Thank you.
We need that. And talking to some people here made me switch the talk. I have like 3 versions of the talk. A 60-minute talk, an 8-minute talk, and an endless talk. And I thought you'd be good for the 60-minute talk, but I upgraded you to the endless talk when I got some of the questions. I switched the slides over there. So we're going to be in a politics-free zone as long as you want to be there. We have one more ground rule that's pretty important. What do we call this stuff you've been drinking? Thank you. We will not be calling it soda, Beverly. We will not be calling it tonic or carbonated beverages, and we will especially not be calling it Cokes. No. Well, Ken was right when he said that I did get really thirsty working on this book. I'm going to pass this one around. This is called Coney, Detroit. I'm working at the new talk on Coney, Detroit because the Faygo talk is much better than the talk that used to be given about this book. But I'm going to call it about Michigan conies because there's so many different kinds. So I got really thirsty working on this one. Let me just, it's full of pictures. That's the way I write. Very colorfully. And I had so much fun, and it makes people feel so good about Detroit and Michigan. I said, I should do that again. I thought, what other product other than Art Vans could I write about that would be interesting and that people would have fun learning about? And I couldn't believe my good luck when I found out that nobody had done a book about Faygo. Later on, I found out why. So I said, I'll do a book about Faygo. So I took a couple copies of Coney, Detroit to the Faygo offices on Gratiot. I went in to see Al Chittero, the guy who runs the company there. And I said, this is the kind of book I do. I want to do a book like this about Faygo. It'll be fun, it'll make people happy, it'll be colorful, it'll be good for your business. He said, well, that's very interesting. If the owner of our company wants a book about Faygo, I'll let you know. That's right, that's right. I left. He never answered another email, another phone call. I wrote him a nice letter when he got a promotion. Never heard back from him. I said, I'd like to come talk to you about your promotion and your lifelong career with Faygo. Nothing. So I was complaining to my students, and Alex Sharp, one of my students who was not paying any attention, I thought, raised his hand while I'm ranting. I'm saying, a journalist, first thing you got to know about a journalist is they don't know anything. They're not supposed to. They're supposed to listen and learn things and then repeat accurately what they hear. So I cannot tell the Faygo story unless I get sources. That's what every journalist needs, is good sources. And I was complaining to my students that Faygo wouldn't talk to me, and Alex raised his hand and said, do you know Susie Fagenson? I thought, boy, he is way off the case here. And I said, no, Alex, who's that? He said, well, Susie Fagenson was my high school English teacher, and she's a member of the Faygo family. I thought, there's a Faygo family? I didn't know that. And so I said, do you have your high school English teacher's email address? He said, do I have my high school English teacher's email address? Of course I do. And he gave it to me, and I emailed her, and eventually she agreed to meet with me in a public building with a lot of windows along a busy highway. We call it Starbucks. A good place to be interviewed by a strange man. So there's Susie Fagenson in her garage with her red pop clock. And yes, she is the granddaughter of one of the founders of Faygo. And from Susie, I started to learn about the Faygo story, which I knew nothing about. I mean, I didn't even know the name Fagenson. That's how much I knew. Well, I learned, first of all, that the Faygo story, and I kind of knew this, and I can hear it when I talk to you guys. First of all, Faygo is a story about love. about how much we love our Faygo. We love Faygo so much that we even invite it to weddings. Now, this might look like a big double cheeseburger, but that is a cake, a wedding cake. And that can of Red Pop is not a can of Red Pop, that is more cake. And as something of a Coney dog expert, now don't read that whole book. I can tell you that's not really a Coney dog, and I'm kind of suspicious of these sandwiches in particular. We love Faygo so much that we bake it into candles. Have you seen these? Well, if you get one, I have one here, a couple of things. Don't drink it. Don't drink it. It does not go down well. We bake Faygo into this delicious bowl of, oh, I'm one slide ahead of you. These bicycles from the Detroit Bike Company. So there's grape, orange, Arctic Sun, Red Pop, and Moon Mist. They're Faygo line. Here's that ice cream, Rock and Rye from a place in Berkeley. You can't get the recipe, but you can order a bowl. It's kind of expensive, but worth it. Now, this historical society has done an amazing thing. I have seen Faygo put out, I have seen cupcakes put out, Faygo cupcakes put out, but I never saw the taste test tied into the cupcake prizes. That's a first. And yes, you can make Faygo cupcakes. Were they good? They're very good. They're very good. Was this your daughter? Did your daughter make these cupcakes?
Yes, she did.
Can we have a little round of applause for the cupcakes? Thank you. Is your daughter here?
No, she just called me though. She wanted to know how the cupcakes went.
Well, they got a round of applause. And, she could probably have another dozen made by the time I'm done.
Okay.
You might say this guy from Flint loves Faygo a little too much, maybe. Yeah, that's his arm. That's his arm. Your husband's missing, ma'am? Can you describe him? Yeah, I think so. That's going to look great in about 20 years, right? That arm belongs to a guy named Slacker. Because Faygo wouldn't talk to me, I had to go all over to get the pictures. I think I did. I took that one myself, and then I went other places to get the other pictures we're going to see here. For me, the Faygo story really began in Detroit in 1905. Here it is. That's Detroit, 1905. Nice wide streets. Not many cars. We were ahead of our time, weren't we? Okay, we got the streets now. Get busy with the cars. In 1905, a guy named Perry Fagenson dropped in on Detroit. There he comes from Cleveland. Perry Fagenson was a Russian Jew who immigrated first to Cleveland with his family, and then he moved up to the Jewish enclave in Detroit. And he started a business. Now, Perry Fagenson was not a very good businessman. He started a business and almost immediately hated it. His business was, he started as a baker. Can you guess why he hated being a baker? Yeah, he hated those morning hours. Not a morning guy. So almost immediately he said, I made a big mistake. I didn't realize that somebody has to get to make all these donuts. So he sent back to Cleveland for his little brother, Ben. He said, Ben, come on up to Detroit. Let's go into business together. It'll be great. This doesn't stop. That's not me, I promise. So Ben came up. Is it when I step on this, does that happen?
No, that little red thing. See it flashing?
Yeah.
Yeah, you just step on it.
You want to come up here with me? So Ben came to Detroit, and I'm guessing this part. Like, Perry, are we going to make bakery? And Perry said, no, we're getting out of the bakery business. In Cleveland, you worked for your in-laws pop company, Miller Becker. It's now called Cotton Club. And Perry said, we're going to make pop, and you're going to make it. Ben said, well, I know how to make pop, but I don't have any recipes, Perry. They don't give me the recipes. They just have me make things up and bottle them and stuff like that. Perry said, not a problem. I have all these frosting recipes we don't need anymore. We're going to turn frosting recipes into pop. Now, think about that taste test. Maybe that's why that pop tastes a little sweet. A little bit. So they started on November 4th, 1907 with 3 flavors. Fruit punch, grape, and strawberry pop, which we call You guys are very smart. Very smart. Is that you? Let's try it different. You can only take so much of that. Let's see if this works a little better. Does it make me look taller? Oh, good, okay. So, they started in 1907, and Perry continued to make business mistakes. The first mistake was, and I hate to bring up a sore point, given what the stock market has been doing lately, November 4th, 1907 was about 3 weeks after a worldwide recession began. Eventually it ended. The other problem was, in those days, people sold pop in 7-ounce bottles. If you go to the store and get one of those little tiny cans of Coke, that's about 6 or 7 ounces right there. That size, that was the size of a pop in 1907. And they were selling their pop 3 cents each in glass bottles, not cans, 3 cents each or 2 for a nickel. The problem was, it costs more than a nickel to make the bottle. So if I sell you something for 3 cents, where the bottle without anything in it costs me a nickel, how long can I stay in business? Not very long, unless I get those bottles back, wash them out real well, and reuse them. So that's what they had to do. There was another problem, as if that's not enough. Now, these boys were making pop at home, as in inside their house. And they were doing what they had a wash basin, some pots and pans, a rubber tube for filling, and a thing for putting the caps on. Now those caps did not go on very well, and a lot of the roads were not smooth like these roads, and so what would happen is the fizz would go out of the pop right away. So you had to make pop on one day, then shut down your line, and deliver it the very next day. Then go back, reopen the line, make more pop, shut it down, deliver it on the 4th day, back and forth all through the week. So it was very inefficient. However, they were doing well. Despite the recession, the crazy pricing model, and this starting and stopping, they were doing so well that before too long, they had one of these. In fact, their first one was a 1-horsepower model. Now that guy up there at the reins, that's Perry. And you can see how happy he is that he's not a baker anymore because of the big smile. Perry said these horses were a great idea because the horses learned the route. So you could walk down the sidewalk and the wagon would come right along with you and the horses would stop at the saloon where you were dropping off the pop. So you just go around, take the case off of the cart, take it into the saloon, bring out the empties, go down the street, and the horses would stop at the next saloon. You didn't have to hop up and down all the time. You see, it's pretty far. He said this was a great idea, except if you were going shopping or on a date. Because the horses continued to stop at every saloon every time they went by. So he said, come on, we're not doing that today. Come on, let's go. So he had to budget some extra time. Now, how could they do well with all the mistakes that Perry made? Detroit was the fastest growing city in the world. From 1900 to 1920, Detroit's population grew from about 258,000 people to about 928,000. It almost quadrupled. Fastest growing city in the world. Why?
Henry Ford's $5 a day?
Henry Ford, even before the $5 day it started, the $5 day came in 1914. It was already booming before then. This was back around 1910. So lots of people were coming to Detroit. Lots of people were working and getting thirsty. And before too long, they needed Coney donuts. And so Henry Ford's factory. Now this sign here came out of Henry Ford's Piquette Avenue plant. It was in a pop machine. It wasn't in a Ford. In fact, what happened is there are guys restoring that factory so that we can tour it now. It's not going to become a parking lot. And a guy was cleaning out a closet. He found this sign, and he found the sign back by the tasting station. And he looked at the sign. He probably said something like F-O-R-D. R.D. Wait a minute, this is not Ford stuff. Get rid of it, let's throw these signs in the dumpster. But one of the guys working there, named Mike Skinner from the Grosse Pointe Historical Society, I bet you guys might know him. Mike Skinner sent me pictures and said, do you want these signs for your talk? I said, oh, they would love these in Clinton. So I met him in the parking lot next to a bar on Woodward Avenue, and he gave me the signs, and here they are. But they came out of the first plant. Most of the Fords, most of the Model Ts that Henry Ford built were built in this plant in Highland Park. This is where the $5 day was announced in 1914, and this literally made headlines around the world, and people came here from all over for $5 a day, which I think is what General Motors was offering in December, wasn't it? They said, if you come to work, we'll pay you $5 a day again? I said, no, not anymore. And the other thing they did was they shortened the workday from about 10 hours to 8. So everybody wanted a piece of that. They came here. Now, these people were working hard, getting thirsty. It might be that they would run right from the factory across the street to where there was a big pop stand set up. They used to sell pop, not just in saloons, but also in pop stands. They didn't have 7-Eleven yet. No CVS. Okay? So they would run across the street and buy pop, except for one thing. Henry Ford had his own name for pop. He did not call it pop or tonic. Do you know what Henry Ford called it? He called it belly wash. He did not want his men drinking any belly wash at lunchtime. So at lunchtime, he had the gates to the factory closed. So the men couldn't get out. One person said, if the men couldn't get out and get any pop, what did they drink at lunchtime? I said, beer. He said, oh, okay. Despite Henry Ford, these guys did pretty well. So well, in fact, they stopped buying gasoline. I mean, they started buying gasoline. They stopped buying hay. Because by 1912, they had one of these. There's Perry smiling. See how happy he is? And they have a nice new truck built by? Exactly right, GMC. This was a GM truck they started with. Now, at the same time, Perry also bought a Model T for personal use. But they started with a GMC truck. At that time, in that year, GMC stood for the Grabowski Brothers Motor Company, which was subsumed by General Motors. And General Motors liked the logo so well, they kept it. And General Motors started making the trucks themselves the next year. But this was a Grabowski. That's what they started in. Although General Motors claimed. Now, they continued to do well. So well, in fact, that their house where they were making all this pop got crowded. It was a crazy house. There were bags of sugar in the living room. There was all this, a lot of wash tubs now in the kitchen. There were bottles all over the place. They had to be washed. They were doing this all in their house. They added on to the house. It's still too full. And they said, we're going to have to move out of our house. But somebody woke up and said, no, we don't move out of the house. We move the pop out of the house. So they started a brand new, modern, state-of-the-art, cutting-edge, highly automated factory, a pop factory. Would you like to see it? Okay, now, just for context, this is the new factory. It was built in 1920, which was a long time ago. 1920, as you know, is the year women got the right to vote. 1920. Before this year, women were not allowed to vote. So this goes back to that centennial we're celebrating now. So here we are in the 1920 factory, and if you look way up there, you can see Perry standing next to a guy in a straw hat. See how happy he looks? He's giddy. Back here, there's 1, 2, 3 guys by the back wall up there, and then 3 guys here, and 1 guy here. Now pay attention. 1 guy here is African American. And 1 guy over here, this guy, is smoking a pipe over the bottles. Now, I didn't realize this at first. A bottle collector pointed this out to me, Joe. He said, look at the bottles. They're all upside down. So there they are. In the earliest days, they made the cases to accept the bottles upside down because that helped keep the cap on. So there's probably no pipe ash in that Faygo. But now, I don't know how you did your taste test. I know you had to have your eyes closed. But when I take a drink of Faygo, I always look at it first. That's just me. So here we are, 1920. This factory was capable of making 70,000 bottles of pop every day, untouched by human hands. despite the pipe ash. Now, this made me realize that besides being a love story, the Faygo story is one of loyalty. Look at this. Now, if I go to Marquette or, oh gosh, even Midland, people, they're different there. They don't know what I'm talking about, but you guys will. I want to show you, somebody said, where do they buy? Well, I call this, I'm the only one who does this, I call that area there Faygo Town. Now right here, this is Woodward Avenue, and if you look here, this is like an inset of it, so you know that over here is Comerica Park and Fort Field nowadays. But back when they started, this is where the bakery was, where that grape spot is. I organized the whole book by flavors. You know how some books have chapters? I don't have chapters, I have flavors. So it goes from red pop to grape to orange and rock and rye and moon mist and Arctic sun. So you never really get lost. So this grape spot is where the bakery was for just a little bit, like 2 years. And then you see they moved over one street and up about 5 blocks into their house. And that's where they had their pop company. And then when it got too crazy in there, they came back 1 block and 2 streets over, and they came onto Beaubien and Erskine. Now they're going to be there from 1920 to 1935. I want you to remember 1935. I want you to remember this street here, Gratiot. I know you know about Gratiot. That's about 2,000 feet away from this place. So they never moved very far. That's where they still are. They still bottle on Gratiot. That's where their factory still is. I want to talk a little bit about this neighborhood here, this green neighborhood here. This neighborhood, which would be like right here, that's called Black Bottom. Black Bottom was its name because the soil was very good for, any gardeners here? Probably. It was very rich soil. It was river bottom soil. Some people get confused because this also was the neighborhood, that green area, where all the black people in Detroit had to live. They were not allowed to live in other parts of the city. And that didn't change right away. So that guy we saw working in that 1920s factory, probably, he must have lived in this neighborhood, unless he took the bus for Windsor. And so he crossed Gratiot and he walked over to work over there. He was probably brought up by Henry Ford in a train, but for some reason he wasn't working for Henry Ford. Maybe he didn't work out, maybe he would prefer to work for Faygo. So probably Ford brought him here, and then the Faygos were employing him over there near his neighborhood. So I want you to hang on to all of these ideas. Gratiot Avenue, 1935, and Black Bottom, they're all going to connect in a minute. I want to move to the next chapter in the book, which is about what goes into pop. What do you think pop is made of? Sugar, or some kinds of water. What kind of water? Carbonated water. Flavoring. Those are the main things in it. So it's, if you examine pop, it's about 95% carbonated water, about 50% sugar, and about 10% flavoring. And that's why they have to put those caps on so tightly, because it's way more than 100%. So let's take a look at the carbonated water. Now here's Susie again. I like this picture of Susie. Now that factory, let me tell you about that factory. That factory was built in 1920. We know that because there was a newspaper article before it was built and then after it was built. There were newspaper articles about it. And the newspapers are dated. So we know that factory opened in 1920. My guess is that that picture we looked at was taken in 1920 because all the cases in the picture say Fagenson Brothers Bottling Company. But, now Faygo on its website said the name Faygo came along in 1924. But in the Jewish News, there was a newspaper ad on a page dated in 1920 for a company called Faygo selling 8 flavors of pop. So the name was at least as old as 1920. My guess is, we know they built the factory in 1920. I don't find older references to Faygo. My guess is, when they built the factory, they sort of rethought everything. They said, what should we call our stuff? They said, Fagenson doesn't fit too well on those little bottles. Let's try Faygo. So my guess is they built a new factory, they changed the name, it was a real page turner for them. Now they decided to call it Faygo, which is a corruption of their longer Russian name. I wonder if when they were sitting around the kitchen table figuring out their strategy, if anybody suggested the name Ben and Perry's. You think anybody would buy something called Ben and Perry's? No way. So, that bottle, what's that bottle called that Susie's holding? Seltzer bottle. And it has both names on it, Faygo Beverages, Fagenson Brothers Company. So that's got to be more recent than 1920. Or 1920 at the oldest because it has Faygo on it. I have a seltzer water bottle that only says Fagenson Brothers on it. And it's not painted, it's etched. So that's got to be a little bit older than 100 years. So seltzer water is carbonated water, it's fizzy water. It occurs in nature, and people found it in nature, and then they figured out how to make it because they concluded it must be healthy for you. At that time, people were going up to the mineral springs and sitting in sulfur springs, and they were trying different things that came out of the ground, and they decided that seltzer water was good for you. It was like medicine, and then people started adding actual medicine to the seltzer water. They added cocaine. They added lithium. They added ginger. And then I think somebody said, you know, this stuff could taste a little better. So they started adding some of that sugar. You know, I write in the book a lot about saccharin. Saccharin goes back to 1879. That's not a new thing. It's older than Faygo. So they started turning that seltzer water into a medicine drink and then something that was more fun, something a little bit more like this. Now, what do you call that guy?
A soda jerk.
What did you call him, ma'am? A soda jerk?
Yeah.
Did you date him? Why do you call him a jerk? Just something you heard, you picked it up on the street. It's that left hand. He's got to jerk that handle, and it shoots the seltzer water down into that glass. And he can now, we've had discussions about what is he serving there. I went to a place in southern Michigan called Blissfield where they have a setup just like this. And they got nice root beer flow. And they have some syrup in there, some sweetener, some seltzer water, and then a scoop of ice cream. Delicious. So it's not an act. Now, you probably heard of a thing called Vernors. Does anybody ever have Vernors when they're sick? All the time. You have it cold or warm? Who has a cold? Who has a warm? You know? Just this morning, and I said I wasn't going to talk about politics, but just this morning, I sent a case of Vernors to the CDC. So this is what you need. This is the cure. So when they get it, I expect there will be a headline. Detroit, solving the pandemic. So it's not by accident that the guy who invented Vernors, James Verner, was a pharmacist. He worked in a place like this. He could get all kinds of stuff like ginger and sweeteners and seltzer water. It's not an accident that Coca-Cola was invented by a pharmacist. Pepsi-Cola was invented by a pharmacist. Dr. Pepper was a pharmacist. And Faygo was invented by... Oh, you made up for that Ford GM problem. Okay. That's right. And at Faygo they said, you know, this is not a miracle drug. This is not a cure for anything. It's just fun. And for the Fagensons, fun meant flavors. They wanted to have a rainbow of flavors, so their plan was to come out with new flavors all the time. 3 in 1907. That 1920 newspaper ad I mentioned during that year of suffrage said Faygo in 8 flavors. Yeah, 8 flavors. On this can, this is a steel can signed by a guy you're going to meet soon, Mort Fagenson. This came out in 1977 when Faygo was 70 years old, and he said Faygo makes 28 flavors nowadays, and to make those flavors we use 107 ingredients. So it's not like you squeeze an orange over carbonated water and add sugar and sell it. That doesn't work. You've got to mix a bunch of things together. 107 ingredients to make 28 flavors. I later found a case, somebody gave it to me, It said 33 great flavors. I'm like, how many flavors did they have? They used to have a commercial. How many flavors do you think we have, or what flavors you got? And so I called Faygo and I said, how many flavors of Faygo have you had? Do you know what they said? Nothing. They didn't tell me. They were advertising that they had 50 flavors up, but they wouldn't tell me how many they had. So I started looking through recipe books and on eBay for pop bottles and bottle caps and all kinds of things people collect and old newspaper ads. And I started making a list of all the flavors. Faygo has made more than 100 flavors. And when you think about it, orange and diet orange are not the same. Wouldn't that be something if you could just swap the label and lose weight? Makes me want to eat a bag of light potato chips. So, the flavors have been very, now, I'm pretty sure my list is not complete. I'm pretty sure my list is not complete because Faygo wouldn't help me and I'm doing an unscientific way of, scrounging. But they had a lot of flavors that we don't see anymore. Lime Ricky was a flavor of Faygo. They had did you ever have apple pop? No. They had a flavor called Eve. It was apple pop. They had, for the little kids, they had something for kids called Faygo Brow. So while mom or dad were having the beer, you could have your Faygo Brow. It looked and foamed just like beer. Wasn't that good? Mort said, I'd like to see the young ones start early. I don't know what he was talking about. And if you were a rich kid or a cosmopolitan kid, then you could get a thing called Chateau Faygo, which is imitation wine. They had a whole family of pop flavors. Get this one. Diet chocolate cream pie pop. They had key lime pie pop. They had apple pie pop. They had cherry pie pop, and they had a Traverse City Cherry Festival pop for a while. They had rhubarb pie pop. That makes some people shiver a little bit. Well, I want to tell you about one particular flavor. It became a problem. It was called, pineapple orange. If you're like me, you like to stay in fancy motels. And sometimes I stay in one of those fancy motels where they have like a breakfast out there. And it's like 3 kinds of bread. You can get a donut, a bagel, a muffin. And then they have a juice machine. And you can you might have 3 juices coming out of one machine. Isn't that fancy? And you can if they have pineapple and orange, you can make your own juice. I like to stay there. So they ordered Florida orange juice up from Florida. And they got some nice unpasteurized pineapple juice from Hawaii. And it came to Detroit. They put it all together in a flavor mixing bag with some sugar and some carbonated water, mixed it all up, capped it up real tight. It was so good. They went off to have a launch party at the Fort Pick Shelby Hotel downtown. They had pineapples on the table. They said the men wore Hawaiian shirts. I don't know why the women didn't get to wear them too. But the women took home the pineapples, I guess. So they were having their launch party at the hotel down there that's on Lafayette. And meanwhile, back at the factory on Gratiot, the pop started having its own lunch party. And when they got back in there, they noticed some of the pops were exploding and the caps were busting up the lights in the factory. They said, what's going on with the pop? And the phone started ringing and little owners of these small mom and pop shops would call and say, there's something wrong with your pop, it's making a mess in my store, you gotta get it out of here. And Orville Hubbard himself, the mayor of Dearborn, called Faygo and said, your pop is a menace to Dearborn. You have to get it all out of here by sunset. So they sent the drivers out to clean up the mess. The drivers were so mad about it, they went on a wildcat strike. They got that pop out of there, and they replaced it with some pop made with pasteurized pineapple juice, and the pop quieted down quite a bit. Now I want to tell you about my favorite pop. This requires a costume change in a minute. But this is my favorite pop. Isn't she beautiful? That nice long neck. No. Over here. Over here. She's beautiful. Oh, this is a Victorian lady. You probably heard about them. Victorian ladies, as you may know, are teetotalers. They do not drink any alcohol. Now, a Victorian lady might get a little tickle in her throat, in which case she might need a tonic, a little medicine, and there she has a little medicine glass, so she take a little sip of the medicine for her cough. She needs another sip, she'd have another little dose. Maybe when we get to St. Patrick's Day, she might have several doses. What is rock and rye, or in her case, rye and rock? What is that made of? Anybody know? It's made of rye whiskey. In fact, it pretty much is rye whiskey with a little bit of rock candy sugar in it to smooth it out a little bit, because rye whiskey is kind of coarse. Certainly too coarse for a Victorian lady who doesn't drink. So they would take rye whiskey and they would mix it with rock candy sugar or cinnamon or horehound or honey, and people just turn the name around. Now the kind of rock and rye we get today from Faygo, it might cure your cough, but it won't get you drunk. Don't try. Here's the costume change. Having a wardrobe malfunction. I'm back now.
It's like Thunderbirds where you have to wear the hat.
You gotta wear the hat. So this guy in the hat is a famous Faygo employee, Harvey Lipsky. Harvey Lipsky came to the company as a young chemist, and he stayed more than 50 years. Another sign of that loyalty. He stayed more than 50 years. He loved Faygo. Now the people at Faygo called him Mr. Faygo, even though he was not a Faygo, so they called him Mr. Faygo, the unofficial company historian. He could help me a lot. He liked to call himself the master elixir mixer because he helped create the diet flavors. And he was very excited being an elixir mixer when Perry Fagenson came to him one day and said, Harvey, I'm getting a little bit too old to get up on these stools and stands and everything to make these flavors. I need you to know how to make the rock and rye. Harvey was like, whoa. Perry said, settle down and pay attention. Take notes. Here's how you make it. Now watch this. You take 2 gallons of this and you put it into a flavor mixing bag. You take 2 cups of that and pour it in. 2 tablespoons of this, 2 teaspoons of this, 2 pinches of that ingredient, a little bit more of this one, and you stir it all up, Harvey. And then, very important, you take this towel. You take this towel, not any towel, you take this towel, and you flap it over the mix and you say these words. And Harvey wrote it all down, and he thought, I'm a chemist. I don't go in for incantations and mumbo jumbo. So when it was his turn to actually make the rock and rye, he didn't use the towel. He made it without the towel, and he didn't say any magic words. He just mixed the ingredients, and it came out wrong. So he said, oh. So he said, I'm going to follow my notes more carefully this time, and he followed them precisely, right order, exactly the right measurements. He mixed it up. It was still wrong. He said, well, now I'm not going to do it a third time and expect a different result. So he made it again. He flapped the towel. He said the words, the rock and rye came out perfect. So, because Faygo has never told me otherwise, I believe this is how they still have to make rock and rye. Faygo would have said something, right? Now, so that's seltzer water, that's flavor. The next ingredient is, I said there'd be no politics. I'm going to try to keep that to a limit, but this is one of the most political ingredients in our country's history, right up there with where oil is today, and that's sugar. We won't get into sugar's history. That's a whole other book. Maybe one of you will write it. During the Great War, they discovered that as we were sending, we got into that a little bit later than some other places, we were sending soldier supplies and food to Europe where there's a war going on. Ships had to be diverted to bring cane sugar. You can't make good pop with sugar beet sugar. We have a lot of it in Michigan, but it's the wrong kind of sugar. You gotta have cane sugar for pop. And that was mostly coming from places like Cuba and Haiti and Central America. And it was all coming to feed this woman who is squashed half of Manhattan here. She just sat on it. She's slurping up all that cane sugar in half the ocean. And the United States Food Administration says sugar means ships. You got to cut back on not just your sweetened drinks, but also your brownies, your cupcakes. Yeah, cut back on those cupcakes, your cookies, all the things we love. Have an apple. It's good for the war. So, this was all voluntary, and we got through it. We were not in the war that long before it ended, and so we got done with that anti-sugar campaign, and the Fayginsons went back to work, and they were doing pretty well in that modern 1920 suffragism era factory until 1935, when Black Bottom got full. They couldn't put any more people in Black Bottom. They said, it's full, but we still need more workers. What should we do? Somebody said, we have to expand Black Bottom. Somebody else said, no, you don't have to expand it. Just make it taller. I said, make it taller? Yeah, make it a high-rise. Instead of 2-story houses, make 6, 8, 10, stack people up. I said, well, that sounds like a pretty good idea. Where do you suggest we build this high-rise? And he looked around and he said, that factory where the Fayginsons are making pop, we don't need a factory there. We need housing. So the federal and the city governments condemned the Fayginsons factory. They had to move out, so the factory could be torn down. This time it was Ben to the rescue. Maybe he was the smarter business partner. He came in and he said, Perry, look what I found. I found this out on Gratiot Avenue, 3579 Gratiot Avenue. What did you find, Ben? I found the horse mark. The horse mark? Yeah, Perry. Back before Henry Ford, people used to use horses, and they would walk their horses in this way. They could buy, sell, and trade horses, and that's how people conducted business. But we don't need a horse mart anymore, so it became a Canadian truck factory. It was owned by a company called Gottfriedson. They moved out, and now that whole factory is empty and available and not too expensive. Ben said, yeah, but Perry said, yes, Ben, but it's huge. We don't need that much space. Ben said, I know we don't need that much, but we're kind of stuck. They condemned our factory. We've got to find a place fast. Maybe we can grow into it or rent out space to people. So what they did was they moved into there in 1935, and that's where they still are. Although you wouldn't recognize any of this because it's all covered over now with sort of like a ugly brown tin facade. So they went in there, and they were doing pretty well. They were doing fine, in fact, until World War II came. Now the wars get numbers. And with World War II, there came more sugar rationing. But this time it wasn't voluntary. It was for real. There were penalties if you violated the sugar rations. Homeowners needed these coupons to get their ration goods. It wasn't just sugar. Now, sugar was the first thing rationed in World War II. The first thing rationed after Pearl Harbor was sugar, and it was the last thing to be de-rationed. What else got rationed during World War II? What have you heard about? Rubber.
Coffee.
Butter. When I take my mother is 91 in May. When we go shopping, she says, oh, she checks it. She says, we got to get the oleo. That goes back to those times. She complains about her shoes. She says, you know, nylons were rationed, leather was rationed, fat, meat, gasoline, cigarettes. School was not rationed. You could have unlimited amounts of school. And she complained because her mother used to take her to Windsor to get her shoes because they didn't have coupons to get enough shoes for my mother in the United States. And the Canadian shoes were not stylish. If you're Canadian, I apologize.
Couldn't buy tires.
Couldn't buy tires. If your tire wore out, you were just wearing out your shoes. You don't have a place to go to. So what happened was, now, you don't expect a company like Coca-Cola to show up at the sugar place with a truckload of ration coupons. That's just for homeowners. Coca-Cola, Faygo, Sanders, all of those kind of companies were limited to 80% of their pre-war supply. So whatever you used last year, you get to use 80% of that this year. That's your new limit, just across the board. Well, this was very hard for some companies. Coca-Cola began sort of like a little campaign to try to get more sugar. Before long, generals in the war started writing to the White House saying, we need more sugar. These troops need to be refreshed, and we all know Coca-Cola is very refreshing, right? They tell us that all the time. It's very refreshing. Who needs refreshment? Who deserves refreshment more than the troops? Look at this, look at this. This guy, imagine how happy I was when I found out that guy is Private First Class Norman Taylor from Detroit. I needed to find a picture. I found a picture. of somebody drinking pop during the war, and it's a guy from Detroit. Look at that. But he's standing in this mud. He's in Italy with these other troops. This is all mud. There's smoke back there. I don't know if those guns are shooting or if there's a fire or what's going on. And look up there. Up in the sky, there's a big piece of Scotch tape. When they tell you war is hell, they're not kidding. Tape all over the place, smoke, mud. They said these troops need to be refreshed. Coca-Cola tried to help with the problem. Coca-Cola loaned one of its highly paid executives to sit on the U.S. Federal Sugar Rationing Board. So when the federal government sat down to make rules about sugar, Coca-Cola was helping. Coca-Cola said we would make all the refreshing Coca-Cola they need except for the 80% rule. We're limited. And the board said, that's right, you're limited just like everybody else. However, if you could make Coca-Cola just for the troops, we could give you a little sugar just for the troops. Wouldn't count against that 80%. But Coca-Cola, you have to do one thing for us. You have to build 10 bottling plants around the world in places like Italy so that the troops will get the pop. Coca-Cola said that would be very expensive. But we'll do it. And at the end of the war, somehow, Coca-Cola was the biggest pop bottler in the world. Now, the Fayginsons were not sitting around doing nothing. They were also helping with the war effort, but in a more traditional way. This is just after the war. There's Perry Fayginson in the middle. You might not recognize him without the hat and with the smile. He's celebrating 40 years of Faygo. So this is 1947. This is Mort Fayginson, the guy who rode on the can. Snappy dresser. War veteran, decorated with the Silver Star. That's Herman Fayginson, Perry's other son, also a veteran. And that's Susie's dad, Phil, son of Ben, Perry's nephew. Interesting that he's sort of to be outside of the picture. So Perry is very happy now because the sons are, the next generation is back from the war, they're all okay, and they're ready to take over the company. And you know what that means when the next generation takes over a company, right? It means, that's as far as I go. It means you can have a whole new look, a whole new everything. Now, that might be true, except for one thing. Although he was happy to have a second generation in place, hold on a second. Okay, that's it. You didn't pay for anything more than that. Anybody got $1? So, the next generation is there. However, Perry is so happy that he keeps coming to work. Here he is, driving to work in a steam shovel. Not really, he's just posing. They rented the steam shovel because during the 40s what happened was, around that area, the horse mark, that area was called Pop Alley. There were 40 bottlers, 40 bottlers of beer and pop in that immediate neighborhood in Detroit. They were right next to a Coca-Cola plant and right next to a Pepsi-Cola plant, Dawson Pepsi Company. If you've ever been down to Belle Isle and seen the Dawson Great Lakes Museum, your history people, the Dawson family owned the local Pepsi bottling business, and that boat outside of the museum is called the what? The Miss Pepsi. It was their marketing thing. Susie told her dad, we should have a Miss Faygo. She was so mad at her father, he wouldn't listen to any of her good ideas. She also said that they should hire Darryl Strawberry to advertise Red Pop. He didn't do that either. Maybe that was smart. So, what Perry said was, look, we've been losing our neighbors here in Pop Alley. We're not here to put other people out of business, guys. We're not here to put Ben's family, the Miller-Becker family in Cleveland, out of business. We're not here to be Coca-Cola. We're a good local company with surprising flavors. We make good money for ourselves. We treat our employees right. We're good for the city. We're just going to keep doing what we're doing. So the boys had a little bit of a restriction on what they could do. Now, Herman, the guy who's over in the upper right, became the bookkeeper. And Herman didn't work at the factory that much. The guys who were always in the factory were Mort, the flashy dresser, and Phil, his cousin. They were always in the factory. They worked in the same office over two desks that were pushed together. no carpeting on the floor, Venetian blinds, you know what those are. Nothing fancy, no big gold lettered sign on the door saying this is where the bosses be. And, hold on while I change costumes again. This is an important step. It took me 6 months to learn or to remember that you should tie the apron in front where you can see what you're doing. I don't like to have things going on behind my back. Okay, so, Mort was the spokesman for the company. He always gave the interviews, he wrote the articles. He was, when TV cameras came, he was on TV. And Phil was Mr. Insight. He was always walking around the inside of the factory talking to all the men. Now, all the men said, the men I talked to say, both guys knew every employee by name. So it's not like Mort was aloof, he was just a little bit for the limelight. So, during the days at the factory, Phil would walk around, he would go into the warehouse. See how the guys would, hey guys? He would go into the flavor mixing room, the loading dock. One driver said it would be Phil who'd be out there in the morning saying, get this Faygo on the road, people want their pop. So he was doing all of that. And Susie said that, oh, my father loved that factory. It was his baby. I said, what does that mean, the factory was his baby? She said, he had to tuck it in at night. What does that mean, tuck it in? She said, he had to make sure all the men were back and all the trucks that were supposed to be back that day were back, or he couldn't go to sleep. I said, did your father ever come home for dinner? She said, oh yeah, he always came home for dinner, but sometimes he went back out again, like if it snowed or something. So what was that like when your dad came home from work? Because I remember when my dad came home from work. She said, oh, when my dad came home from work, I would run to him and I would throw my arms around him and I would nuzzle his shirt. And some days I would say, Daddy, it's a red pop day. He'd say, that's right, Susie, we were making red pop today. But she could smell it on him. I said, when you got older, did you ever work for your dad's factory? She said, yeah, I worked there. I was a student, and I worked there one summer. Oh, nice. What summer was that? 1967. Oh, what was that like? She said, well, 1967 wasn't a great summer all the way through. You know what happened in July. She said, we were watching on TV, and it was terrible. There was fires, and there was soldiers, and there was people getting killed, and the whole place was getting torn up. So we didn't go to work that Monday, and I don't know if we went on Tuesday. And when we did go to work, I was pretty apprehensive going down Gratiot Avenue because there were big armored vehicles coming up and down Gratiot where our factory was. And there were men out there with guns on patrol. And over here was one of the little customers we had, and that store had been looted. All the windows were broken. And there was a store over there that had been set on fire, another one of our customers. And that little store over there was completely gone. So when I got to the factory, I didn't know what to expect. And my gosh, when we got there, the whole thing was okay. There wasn't even one window broken. And she went in, and in a state of shock, she was walking around. She went to her father's big wooden desk, and she found a slip of paper. It had names and numbers on it, like Jackson, $15, Green, $18, Jones, $12. She said, I know what this is. These are IOUs. My father and my uncle have been loaning money to people in the neighborhood. They've been good guys, so the neighborhood is looking out for them. I said, that's a nice story, Susie. But I don't believe it. She said, well, what do you think happened? I said, well, that summer in May, a couple months earlier, in the black newspaper in Detroit, the Michigan Chronicle, there was an article about hiring practices at Faygo. And the Michigan Chronicle said that 60% of the workers at Faygo were black, and 70% of the manufacturing workers were. I think what happened is everybody in the neighborhood knew where the paychecks came from, and they didn't want to mess that up. And Harvey Lipsky, the guy who learned how to make rock and rye, he said that that Monday when Susie and her dad didn't go to work, 95% of Faygo's employees came to work through the smoke and the fire. And people inside said, guys, we're closed, go home. Stay in your houses, don't come out. We'll call you when we're ready to run again. So I think they were loyal in both directions there. Now, one thing about Phil that I found kind of cute was he thought of himself as kind of an amateur advertising executive guy. one of the things he did was, when they stopped selling pop to those little mom and pop stores, that's not why they call them that, by the way, he ordered their trucks up. They had to get big trucks to take big loads of pop to Chatham, Great Scott, Farmer Jack, A&P, all those places. And what Phil said was, when you make our big truck, make it one color on one side, and then a different color on the other side. Okay? And the truck guy said, it's your money, we'll make it whatever you want. So when I went to Susie's house and saw this, I knew what was going on. This was a gift from the trucking company to her father. And this is his desk set, P. Fagenson, and that was on his desk. And that's a mirror in Susie's house behind this, so you can see the other side of the truck. So now, if you're walking down Gratiot Avenue, you see a big red truck go by. Wow, they must have some money. They bought an expensive truck. And then 15 minutes later, a big blue truck might go by. You say, how many trucks did they buy? Well, maybe just one. She remembers going to the stores with her father and her family on the weekend, and while one of them distracted the storekeeper, the rest of the family would go over to where all the pop was, and they would take the Coca-Cola and put it on the floor, put the Faygo up at eye level. So they got everything the way it should be, because you know pop at eye level sells better than pop on the floor. Maybe it was a store like this. Now that thing on the side is called an advertising mural, painted right on the store. When I found that picture on Flickr, I was looking everywhere. Flickr, eBay, you name it, I was looking for stuff. When I saw that picture, I said, oh, that's a great picture, I wonder what's going on. So it said it had been taken by a guy whose name is Nailhead. So I found a Facebook page for Nailhead, and I wrote to him. I said, dear Mr. Nailhead, what's going on? He said, well, I'm an urban photographer, and when I drive around, I don't like to get in the freeway ditches, I like to stay on the surface street. So I was driving down McGraw in Detroit, and I saw these ladders and these men, and they had stripped the siding off this store, and it revealed a mural I had never seen before, with a couple of holes in it, you know. And so I stopped and took a couple pictures. The next time I went by, they were all covered up again, because they put the new siding up. So that's an early form of advertising. Now, here's another one. So you guys got the long show, because you're asking so many good questions. I'm still trying to figure out about the cowboy. This is advertising mural. I met a woman whose father had been a sign painter. What they do is they take a big piece of paper with holes in it, and they put it on the wall and they chalk it, and it shows you where to paint the design. I'm sure if I did that, it would be a mess. So this big sunny Faygo orange sign was on the side of a building, enjoyed by people for about 20 years, until somebody put a store up right in front of it, covered up the whole side. Which is their right, because, I mean, it was their land. But the sign disappeared for about 20 years, until, fortunately, there was a big fire that destroyed the new store, and they had to tear the whole thing down. And then you can see the sign again, and it stayed like that for about 14 months, until some knucklehead painted on it with black paint and destroyed it. And Faygo responded by having this done on the side of its factory. About 12 feet up in the air, behind the barbed wire, over its own parking lot. So as you drive down Gratiot toward Detroit, if you see this over on the right, you know that you're at the Faygo plant. That's how you tell. It's about the only way to tell. Well, they have something on the other end, but that's what I would look for coming from here. Now, this is a more traditional advertisement. This is a billboard, not up on sticks by the freeway, but at ground level next to a store. In 1935, when Faygo moved into the horse market, it hired a company called Donor, a little advertising company, for $1,000 a year. And this was one of their ads. And I like this because it, well, I like the corny headline. I like the giant Faygo bottle. I like the expression on their faces. And whenever I go someplace, especially if it's a nice big crowd like this, I mean, a big crowd of nice people, I look around, because I kind of wonder if they're still married and I might meet them. Are you here? So, Donor went from $1,000 a year to $1 million a year because they became pioneers with Faygo in animated advertising. There goes one now. Now, I need to tell you about this ad a little bit. It's a long ad. It's like a 60-second commercial. And actually, the figures in the commercial looked a lot more like these people than the ones you see in that painting by a guy named Wiedemann. His family lives in California. I found that in an art design book and asked if I could have that. They said yes with conditions. So these urchins in this pop can here are what the commercial really looked like. And what happened is these two boys and this girl were playing, and they hear the pushcart man. He's going around like an ice cream man used to do, right? And he's going, Faygo, black cherry. And the kids hear this, and they go, the black cherry man, the black cherry man. So they run around, and they look in the leaves and the weeds, and they found some coins. And so they ran over to where the black cherry man was, and if you look, this boy is tossing a couple coins up to the man, and this boy has a tin cup into which the black cherry man pours some black cherry. And the boys drank the black cherry, and the mean boy poured the last 2 drops of black cherry out on the ground in front of the girl. And she looked so sad. The black cherry man saw this, and he flipped a coin over her head. She heard it. And she picked it up and held it up to the black cherry man, and he gave her a whole bottle of black cherry, and she took that over to where those mean old boys were, and they wondered, what the heck happened here? She didn't have any money. Well, there's a lesson in that. Be nice. Be nice. Now, there's another, we're going to try something here, see if this even works. There's another commercial. I don't know what it's about. It says, Black Bart, you are through. I don't know what that means. Oh. Let's try this.
So I hear a old-fashioned root beer. The tasty drink with creamy head goodness. Look out! Take a hold up! It's Black Box!
Hush up, gal. It's that famous drink I want. That case of Faygo old-fashioned root beer. So when they say, which way did he go? Which way did he go? Tell him he went first.
Stand where you are. Black Bart, you are through. It's the Faygo can. Madam, do not fear. I will save your Faygo old-fashioned root beer. So the Faygo went on heading through the mountains, and old Black Bart went off his tail, I hear.
The Faygo kid. Which way did he go? Which way did he go? He went first.
He went for Faygo.
Is that what you were looking for? That's what you were looking for. That commercial was so popular, it came back 17 years later. 17 years later, and the news and the free press, which never got along, both ran articles telling you where you could find the commercial, what time. You come in. Did I miss the commercial? No, you're on time. Sit down. Have some Faygo. Watch the commercial.
Faygo's not advertised much anymore.
No, and I don't like the way they do it. It's all stupid stuff on the internet. Don't I sound like an old guy? I'm a history lover, maybe. They had another campaign that was pretty good, and it involved this guy, Snappy. Does anybody know this guy? Who is that guy? The great, who said that? That's correct, the Great Gildersleeve, very good. The Great Gildersleeve, Harold Perry, is one of the few to make a transition from radio, he was on Fibber, McGee and Molly, to movies and some TV commercials. Now, for some commercials, he was a grocer, and people come through and they want to get pop, and it gets kind of crazy. I put about 20 links in the book to different things on the web, most of them commercials, including that commercial, including the previous commercial, including a commercial in which a lot of people sing this song, Remember When You Were a Kid by Ed Lebowski. You remember that song? Do you remember the commercial where they sing that song? Where do they sing that commercial? Where? The Pablo boat? Did you say Pablo? Incorrect. I don't mean to shake up your world, but that commercial was made on the Fiesta, a Mexican tour boat off of Acapulco. Yes, sorry. And later on I'll tell you about Santa Claus. What happened was Donor had the idea so late in the summer, they said, we can't make a commercial for next summer now. It's so late in the year, the river will be frozen soon, because what do we get, like 14 months of winter every year? So they said, we're going to have to make the commercial over the winter. So Donor flew, I met a Donor guy, he said they flew a plane load of family and friends to Acapulco to be in the commercial for the vacation. And so the next summer it came up. That song by Ed Levinsky became so popular, people called the radio station and said, would you play that commercial again? And it went up to number 3 on the music charts. Faygo offered that record with that sheet music for 25 cents, and they had to mail out 70,000 copies. It was a hit. It was a hit. Now, another commercial. Let's see here. This commercial. So we're going to go to 1965 and the Detroit Tigers, just a few years away from glory, right? I remember 1968, or is that just me? Just me. Well, pop had been used to sell, baseball had been used to sell pop for a long time in Detroit. This ad in the Evening News, which is the Detroit News now for a long time, came out the month before the Fagans started making pop, October of 1907. And you might notice in here that even then Coca-Cola was telling people, it's so refreshing. And Ty Cobb, as we all know, made a lot more money working for Coca-Cola than he ever did working for the Tigers. But what happened in 1965 was the Tigers, and this is a little pin from 1965 that I found, because eBay. And they decided they would sell their commercials in a new way. That means not for the whole season. Because when it was the whole season, you had to be a Stroh or a Pepsi to buy those televised games. But now, a little independent company like Faygo could pick and choose. And so Mort and Donor sat down and figured out when they should buy the commercials. Donor came in and said, Mort, we got all the dates you wanted, and we covered the whole distribution area, plus Toledo and Traverse City. Mort said, you're just going to make people mad. There's no Faygo in Toledo. You got to get us out of that market. Donor said, we can't. It's too expensive. It's too late. There's no time. We'd have to make another commercial about something you don't make. So what they did instead was they scraped together about $20,000, and they hired salesmen to put the Faygo into the stores around Toledo and Traverse City. People saw the game, they saw the commercial, they went to the store, they found the Faygo, they drank it, they insisted that Faygo keep sending them Faygo. And now, Perry's gone by now. Martin, Phil, and Howard, I would think, are thinking, we could be a lot more than just your Detroit pop company. We could go big. We could go regional. Once in a while, Mort said, we could go national. And they invaded Cleveland, where Ben had come from. They invaded Toronto. They invaded Pittsburgh. Their plan was to go all the way to the east and then work on the west. And Mort got very interested in celebrity commercials. Let's see how you are. Who is this celebrity right here? Soupy Sales, who told people, George Washington may be the father of our country, but Faygo is the pop. That's Soupy. Now they use voice impersonators to have this guy sell their new diet flavors. W.C. Fields. Any beverage that's not made for small children can't be opened. They didn't have NCIS, but they had Boston Blackie and his leading lady, Lois Collier, and they were just posing for a publicity shot with a glass of cocoa cream soda. If you find this on the back shelf in your refrigerator, do not open it. It'll be about 50 years old and probably not very good. I'd like to try some cocoa cream soda, but It's extinct, I'm afraid. Maybe you recognize this guy. The Hitman. The Motor City Hitman, Thomas Hearns. What's he selling? Faygo. Not Red Pop. Punch. Yeah, of course. Yeah, Hearns selling Punch. And now, somebody asked me about this guy. Somebody in the back asked me about this guy. He played for the Detroit Lions. He was a defensive tackle. Alex Karras. And Alex was big. And everybody kind of liked Alex, but after he stopped playing, he started getting bigger. People were concerned about him, and so the whole city was obsessed with Alex's weight. So Faygo hired him, and in this commercial, Alex is sitting at a round table that's just about covered with a pizza. And the narrator says, "Alex, I thought you were on a diet." He said, "Oh, I am. Look, this Faygo Red Pop tastes just like the regular. It's diet." The announcer says, "Alex, what about the pizza?" He said, "Oh, Faygo doesn't make pizza." Oh, I know. Did you put this in here? This is different. Okay, here it is. Now, I did this not too long ago in St. Clair County. So I'm gonna compare you to St. Clair County. Question number 1. Which of these was not a Faygo flavor? Bright, Tango, Go, Sensation, or 60/40? Not a Faygo flavor. Tango was a Faygo flavor. You remember Tango? Okay. I had like a Mexican kid on it. I think it was a lemon lime thing. So, Bright, Go, Sensation, or 60/40? 60/40, you can still get it. Bright, St. Clair County is looking pretty good. Bright, Go, or Sensation, which was not a Faygo flavor? Bright. Go. That's correct. You saved it. Okay, Go was never a Faygo flavor. I made that up. When Faygo launched its Gold Ginger Ale, it gave away a bar of gold, a golden Cadillac, a gold-plated bottle, or a year's supply of pop. What did they give away?
Bar. I bet they gave the bar. No bar.
Did you say gold bar?
Go bar.
You beat all the counties in Michigan. Nobody gets this one.
All right, look at us.
They gave away a gold bar. Macomb County wins. It was from Tapper's Jewelry, so I'm guessing it was about the size of this button.
Right.
Yeah. But it was a gold bar. That was the prize. Number 3. Faygo 60/40 is 60% grapefruit. Is the other 40% cherry, lime, pineapple, or ginger?
Lime.
Not pineapple.
Lime.
Lime. Who said lime? You get an F. That's the best grade in this class. It's grapefruit and lime, and it says so on the. Do we have a bottle of that back here? No? Okay. It's really pretty good. It tastes to me like squirt. In a 1984 company newsletter, Faygo asked employees to identify its top 10 selling flavors. Which of these flavors did not make the list? Red Pop, root beer, rock and rye, grape, or punch? Grape? You get an F. Grape was not on the list. Yeah. Once somebody guessed rock and rye, I threw her out. Gotta have standards. Okay, last question. Which of these flavors never existed? Moon Mist Green, Moon Mist Red, Moon Mist Blue, or Moon Mist Orange? Orange? Sorry. Didn't you get another one there? You pushed the smart people up to the front row. He says, yeah, they did. That's where we are. Very good. I'd say just on the answer with the gold bar alone, you guys are tops. So what's happening is Faygo's getting all excited about being regional or national. They're going to need more space. They have 6 acres. Board figures they need about 36 acres. And they can't, and believe it or not, in the 1970s, they can't find 36 acres altogether in Detroit. The city asked them to take a look at Zug Island Have you been to Zug Island? For a picnic, maybe? I've been on Zug Island. I wasn't supposed to be, but I got on Zug Island in my car. It's not a place where you want to make anything anybody's going to eat. So the city, the people in the city are getting very upset because they're losing population and they're losing businesses. Here's the mayor, the Red Pot mayor. He had a little refrigerator in City Hall, and on the refrigerator was a sign that said, "If your name's not Coleman Young, this Red Pot is not for you." So he came out to show that he was helping the Fagensons here with his shovel. Mort, he turned gray. Phil lost the rest of his hair. Here's Herman. He looks pretty good still. They're adding on to the factory. They're trying to come up with some kind of solution to make more pop, but they really need a big piece of land. Detroiters are getting frantic because Verner's is bought out and 300 jobs and the factory move out of the city. The world's largest department store is imploded and carted away in little trucks. Motown leaves Motown. How is that even possible? Stroll leaves. The Pistons leave. The Lions leave. Worse, they came back. The pickle company left. Plastic, they moved out. So people are saying, are we going to lose Faygo too? Are we going to lose it all? Well, a lot of pressure on Mort. He's very worried. But something happened opposite of what happened this morning. Back in the late 70s, there was an Arab oil embargo. It made gas prices go like this. Today they went like that, which is like that for us, I guess. That's the end of the economics lecture. So Mort became very happy because they came to a solution that made almost everybody happy. He said, it's no longer affordable for us to make pop and ship it all around the country at these gas prices. We're going to stay right here in Detroit. We're not going to grow. This is what we're going to do. And a few years later, in fact, the Fagensons decided to sell the company. They sold the company. They sold the company to a place called Tree Sweet, a fruit juice company. And then in 1984, Tree Sweet sold it to National Beverage Company. National Beverage Company makes this stuff. Have you seen that? Do you like it?
I can't pronounce it.
Well, I tried to pronounce it. I got yelled at. It's called LaCroix. Don't try to go all Frenchy on us. It's LaCroix. The company that makes LaCroix also makes Rip It, which I am never putting in my body, just saying, Shasta, and Faygo. So I found this near my house, a Faygo sign on the LaCroix display. Now the problem is this, and I'm going to ask for you to help Faygo. As a nation, we used to drink 50 gallons of pop every year per capita. That's like each of us drinking a gallon of pop every week. We're well below 40 gallons now as a nation. And a lot of people seem to be drinking tea and water, milk, stuff like that. So Faygo could be in some trouble, but you can help them now. You can help. Well, first of all, you got to finish up all the Faygo that's in here. But the other thing you can do is, like, I would like everybody to sort of lean this way. And that, oh, good. Now, can you lean that way? Okay. You remember where you just were? Go back there. Okay. Let's keep that thing going a little bit. You're good. Let's try to help Faygo. Let's try to help Faygo. Try to help Joe. Everybody ready? talk to me very much. And when it came to publish the book, somebody at Wayne State University Press said, we can't publish this book. I said, we can't? We've been working on it for more than a year. He said, well, we don't have Faygo's permission. I said, of course we don't have their permission. They won't even talk to us. He said, no permission, no book. I said, I think it's okay to publish this book. She said, are you a lawyer? I said, no, are you? I said, no. And I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll print off the whole story, and I'll mail it to that guy at Faygo with copies of all the pictures. And I'll tell him that the book is coming out. Do you have anything to tell us? And so I mailed it all off, and you know what Faygo said? Nothing. So we published the book. And the book came out and looked beautiful, and then 2 weeks later Faygo called. Now they want to talk. Now they want to talk. And they said, can we buy 300 copies of that book for our employees? And we said, sure you can. So I only have one other thing to say, and that is I have some books over there, some Faygo books, some Pony books, and they're $25 each, and I'll sign it. If you don't want your book signed, that's $26. Thank you. Why would they not talk to me? I got a theory. If you look up news about the guy who owns National Beverage Company, he is a wild man. The billionaire son of a coal miner. Who cusses people out. And I think that Al was afraid if he helped me do a book that the owner didn't like, Al might not get his 50-year bid. So why would I help this guy who I never saw before write a book that might make my boss mad? And I kind of asked Al about this, and that's pretty much it. Oh, this is from a barbershop store. Barbershop Quartet Signature. Just like this. Sir.
I want to commend you on your research. I've worked at Faygo for 47 years.
You worked with me? Oh, maybe I've got some stuff wrong. What did you do at Faygo for 47 years?
Well, I started when I was 17, 11.
Oh, really? And
I
so,
retired.
okay, so you knew.
Oh, you didn't get me on camera, did you?
No, here's the thing. Harvey's still alive.
Wanted in another country. Erase it.
I called there. I